Welcome to A Change of Heart podcast. I'm your host, Angel Walston. And in this space, we navigate life together. We ask the hard questions like, what is the truth you haven't told? But most importantly, we grow together. And sometimes that leads to a change of heart. Hey everyone, welcome back to A Change of Heart podcast. I am your host, Angel. Welcome back to all the returning listeners, new listeners. Hey girl, hey. Welcome to the potty. So today we're going to be talking about the effects, the impact of having a performance-driven, performance-based mentality. And this is kind of a continuation of an episode I did a few seasons ago called I'm Not Doing Anything. But there's some new revelations. So I wanted to do this episode to just kind of share some things that I'm learning as I'm growing, evolving, and figuring things out. But before we get into that, we do have a question of the day. It's a little bit different. We're going to do one gotta go. So we're going to do a couple of them, okay? So the first one, when looking for a partner, you get to keep two. One of them gotta go. Which one you getting rid of? Someone who is smart, someone who is emotionally available, or someone who is physically attractive. Now listen, judge your mama, don't come for me. Smart can go. And my reasoning for that, I am not shallow. However, comma, intelligence is subjective. So you can say they're not smart based off of whatever society or you deem to be like intelligent, but they can be smart in other ways. So I'm going to say smart can go because they can still be intelligent, just not like book smart. And I'm okay with that. Next one, when it comes to food, keep two, one gotta go. Do you want food that is cheap, food that is actually good for you, or food that tastes good? I'm gonna say food that is cheap can go. But listen, I do love my 4 for 4, okay? So don't get that twisted. But I like to eat good, and I'll spend a little bit more money on food, especially if it tastes good. And I love seafood. That's always expensive. So yeah, I'll say cheap can go. Next one is focused on talent. Keep two, one gotta go. Good at dancing, good at acting, or good at singing. I don't really care about acting. Like that's not something I have any desire about. So that one can go. Next one is about friendship qualities. You want a friend who is non-judgmental, one who is trustworthy, one is fun to be around. So this one is actually kind of hard. Dag. So I feel like the trustworthy one, that's a given. Like that one we are not taking off the table. The next one I would take off, non-judgmental or fun to be around. I'm going to take fun to be around off only because I don't know, judgmental people, don't nobody want to do that. But fun to be around, like I don't know if I'm considered fun to be around, to be honest. So somebody who like just wants to chill and like chill on the beach, relax, like we ain't got to do a whole lot. I'm down for that. And so I'm okay with that. All right, let's do two more. One of these breakfast foods have to go. Bacon, eggs, pancakes, or cereal. I'm going to say cereal. I can do without cereal for real. That's not an issue for real. All right, last one. One of these has to go. Getting enough sleep, a social life, or career progress. This is easy for me. You can get rid of that social life, man. Throw her out. I'm good, love. All right, those are the questions of the day. You can leave your responses in the comment section, or you can answer on my Instagram at Angel C. Walston. I will post these in my stories for you to choose which one got to go for you. All right, so let's go ahead and jump into today's topic. So as I mentioned earlier, today we are talking about having this performance-driven, performance-based mindset. And I want to share some things that I'm learning, some things that I'm trying to figure out and correct, as I have been someone who is very like performance based, or someone who has a performance driven mindset. And so what I am speaking of when I say a performance based or performance driven mindset is this mentality that you have to do a lot, or the more that you do makes you X, Y, or Z. meaning that you feel like your worth or your value is tied into what you do. And I think for a lot of us, we can fall into this trap because you get so used to just running the rat race of life. You get used to being in a position where it's like you're busy, you're always doing things. And for some of us, this is something that was like deeply rooted within us from a young age. And a lot of times when we have this performance based mentality, it does come with things that have been instilled in us from childhood. It may be things that were instilled in us from work, from our parents, from teachers. And you feel like the more that I do, the more accepted I will be. The more that I do, the more successful I will be. The more that I do, the more that people will like me. And it puts you in a position where you struggle with people pleasing, and you end up trying to do all of these things, and your identity becomes more so rooted in what you do than who you are. And so we're going to unpack that today. I don't think it's going to be heavy, but I never think it's going to be heavy, and then we kind of take a deep dive. So we are going to do a deep dive today. So as I mentioned earlier, I'm definitely someone who has had and has in some ways still a performance-based mentality. And I realized for me that that is something that pretty much I developed at a younger age. And it wasn't one particular thing that instilled that in me. It was different areas of my life that just through observation, it was things that I picked up on that made me like develop this mentality. And just kind of going back to the Healing Your Inner Child episode, I talked about being the good kid and being the one who always did the right things, being the one who was compliant, being the one who didn't want to rock the boat, being the one who made it easy for people essentially. And I think for me, as I was growing up, I saw a lot of areas within my life where adults specifically were struggling with certain people, whether it was like the quote unquote bad kids in school, or it's like they had different things that were going on. And so it's like, I want to make it easy for you. It's like I was an eager child to make things easy for people. And I'm still like that today. We'll get there. But yes, I was an eager child to make things easy for people. And I wanted to be the one who was like, oh, I don't have to worry about Angel. Like, I know that Angel isn't going to cause any issues. I know she's not going to like be a problem. Like, Angel will be fine. And I realized that no one specifically made me feel like you have to do everything right. You have to be the good kid. You have to not rock the boat. No one said that to me, but just through observation and just seeing how flustered people were, or just seeing how stressed people seemed, or seeing how frustrated people appeared with different things that were happening, I developed this mentality of, well, let me be the one who doesn't cause that. And I am very much so a non-confrontational person. I say that that's true and not true at the same time, because I feel like with my job, I have to be confrontational at times. And it's not so much that I'm non-confrontational, it's just more so I either really care about something to speak up on it and to do a back and forth, or I don't care. Like, y'all know there's no in between with me. So it's like, we're either going to talk about it or I really don't care enough to like make an issue out of it. And I realized even just growing up, it's like I wanted to make sure that I didn't start conflict. I didn't want to, I'm not the person that's going to debate. I'm not the person that's going to be in there like shaking things up. And I do feel like as a result of that, that led me to people pleasing. And it led me to be in a position where it's like, oh, when I do the right things, or when I do quote unquote good things, then that makes people not have to worry about me, or that makes people look at me and be like, oh, I don't have any issues with Angel. And that sounds like all good and dandy, but when you become an adult and you're still carrying that mindset, it can put you in a situation where you're doing a whole lot of things that you really don't need to be doing, just based off of still carrying that mindset from childhood and still carrying a mindset that is essentially based in performance. And I realized that, so let me say this first. When I was thinking about this topic, the thing that came to mind is when you are trying to train your dog or trying to train your pet, and you typically have like a reward system that is with treats. So if you're trying to teach them how to sit, you're trying to teach them how to like not use the bathroom in the house. When they do the good behavior, then you give them a reward, you give them a treat. And if they don't do a good behavior, then they don't get a treat. And a lot of us have been programmed like that as well. So the treat may not be candy, but in some instances, like for childhood, it was. It's like when you're a quote unquote good girl, you get candy, you get snacks, you get like approval. And I realized for me, what I deemed to be the reward when I was a quote unquote good girl was you got approval, or you got like you get a smile, or you get someone, like when I would have parent teacher conferences, the teachers would always say like, oh, Angel, she's a great student, like I wish I had 10 more of her. And so it was like those words of affirmation, that feeling of like, oh, they see me being a good kid. And then that made me feel like, okay, then I have to continue to be a good kid so that I can make people happy. That's problematic, y'all. And as I went into adulthood, that resulted in me ultimately being a workaholic for real, saying yes to things. We talked about this in the commitments episode on last week, but saying yes to things that I didn't really want to do, trying to take the burden off of other people while unintentionally putting it on myself. And it was always about this thing of like wanting to keep the peace, not wanting to stir up anything, not wanting to cause any issues, trying to make things easier for everybody else. And as a result of that, I became a very anxious person because I was always doing too much and taking on too much. And I remember there was a job that I had where I was staying late. And when I say staying late, I mean I was staying like an hour, hour and a half, 2 hours late sometime. I was always like trying to get my work done, trying to be on top of things, like going above and beyond. And I remember my supervisor telling me that, like, you're one of the best employees I've ever had. And it's like, but at what cost? And we won't get paid overtime. So there's that too. And it's like you're doing these things to seek approval. And the downside to that is when you're in a position where you feel like you mess up, or you feel like you do a bad thing or the wrong thing, the weight of that feels super heavy. And it's like, this is not healthy. And this is not a way that you want to live, because ultimately, when you're carrying this performance-based mentality, you put yourself in a situation where your whole identity is about people's approval. It's about what you do. It's about how well you perform, how good you make people feel. And it's like, first and foremost, that ain't never your responsibility to make people feel good. Like, that's an inner thing. But you do put yourself in a situation where it's like your worth and your value is tied to what you do. So then if you're not doing anything, then what? And you also end up creating this atmosphere where you have people wanting to be around you, liking you, approving of you, and it's solely because of what you can do for them. And when that is removed, they are removed as well. So that is something that I am unlearning. I feel like I've been in a good space of unlearning that over the last couple of years, but it also is something that I am having to redefine for myself and having to relook at, because I have lived in a way where even as I'm unlearning it, it still shows up in certain areas of my life. And I'm working on correcting that in a way that I don't continue that pattern beyond where we are now. So I want to share some things that I have learned and that I'm still learning as I'm going through this journey of unlearning. And one of those things that I mentioned in the episode about I'm not doing anything, but think it's worth reiterating here, is the fact that your value and your worth will never be tied solely to what you do. And I shouldn't even say solely. Your worth and your value is not tied to what you do. It's tied to who you are. Because at the end of the day, regardless of what you do or what you don't do, how successful you are, when all of that is removed, you are still you. And your worth and your value is a part of your identity based off of who you are, in spite of what you do, not because of what you do. And I know within this world, we put so much emphasis on success being performance based and what you do, and it being about how much money you make and all of these other things. And so we can put ourselves in a position that we compare ourselves to other people who are in different spaces of their journey, different places in their journey. And we can feel like we are not good enough. We can feel like we're not doing enough. We feel like we need to be doing more. And we completely miss the fact that it's not just about what you do. It's not just about this having this mentality of the more that I do, the more I'll be accepted. And here's another thing, y'all. Acceptance does not matter. I think when we were in like grade school, it was a real thing. That's something that we really cared about. We wanted approval from our peers. We wanted approval from some of us. We wanted approval from our teachers. But at this big age in our adulthood, acceptance is not a thing. Like, if you are so wrapped up in people accepting you, you will end up becoming this version of you that you don't even know at the end of the day, because you're trying to make people happy. I think social media is probably the easiest example of how you cannot make everybody happy. If you just look at different posts and read the comments, someone can be posting something that is like super encouraging, super motivational. And there will be people like, oh my gosh, that helped me so much. Then there'll be other people like, well, I don't know why you said it like that. You should have said this, because how you said it like that is offensive to the people over here. And then you'll have some people, well, I hear what you're saying, and I don't think that it's like wise for you to give that information like publicly, because you can deter, like, you're going to have so many people who are going to come in with their commentary that ain't nobody asked for. And you will constantly be trying to change. And that's not a part of your evolution, honey. Like, I don't know how else to say it except for that is not a part of your evolution to keep evolving into a version that is acceptable for everybody else, but it's not who you are. And for some of us, we lose ourselves even in relationships, friendships, even with our family at times, because we're trying to become this version that everyone else wants us to be. And we have completely lost ourselves. It's not even so much that we've lost ourselves. We don't even know who we are, because we have become so conditioned to being what everyone else wants us to be. And we keep trying to be this image or be this thing or show up in the way that everyone else wants us to, that it's like, do you know who you are without the labels that everyone else has attached to you? Do you know who you are if you don't have approval from people? Do you know who you are? And not just do you know who you are you comfortable with who you are if you don't have that acceptance and approval from people? Are you comfortable with who you are, who God created you to be, if you aren't doing all the things and everything, or even if you're not doing anything? And I think that's an important discussion for us to have, because so many of us, we are stressed out, we are tired, we are anxious, we are depressed, we are frustrated because we are trying to become something that we're not. And not even just trying to become something. Some of us have been something and someone who we are not for so long that it's like this tension that you feel, it's the real you trying to stand up. It's the real you trying to break through this norm that is really dysfunctional and really unhealthy, because you have become so used to trying to make people like you. You've become so used to trying to make people happy with you. You've gotten so used to trying to do everything that people want you to do that you don't even know what you like. You don't even know what you want to do. You don't even know what makes you happy. You don't even know the things that are that you're passionate about, things that you really care about, because you've walked in this identity that is attached to what people said you should be based off of where you grew up, based off of where you came from, based off of your past, like based off of your family's past. And we end up conforming to this ideal that really is not us. I went on a detour there, but y'all get where we were going. So I do want you to think about, who am I outside of what I do? Like, really sit with that. Because a lot of times when you ask someone like, who are you? And that's such a loaded question, right? There's so many layers to that. But for a lot of us, we may say we're a wife, a mom. We may say that we are an author. We are a friend, a sister, a daughter. Like we'll give all of these labels, and it's like, okay, but like who is Angel without the identity of the roles that she walks in? Who are you removing the identity of the roles that are attached to you and the roles that have been placed on you based off of what people think you should be or what you should be doing? Do you feel confident and comfortable to say that you're walking in who you are and becoming who you're supposed to be? Or have you adapted this version of you that really is a version of someone else, of what they think you should be? Another thing that I want to talk about in regards to having this performance driven, performance based mindset is you also have to consider the consequences of, as I mentioned earlier, being in a position when you don't get it right, being in a position where it feels like you are failing. And the weight of that ends up being real heavy, like real heavy, because you are carrying this, you carry the proud moment when you feel like people are pleased with you, when you feel like people are happy with you, when you feel like you're doing the quote unquote right things. But the weight of the opposite of that is when you don't get it right, when you go against the grain, when you feel like someone is upset with you, it's like the tension of that leaves you anxious. It leaves you stressed. It leaves you worried. And you put yourself in a position where you are beating yourself up and you don't even realize, like, one, is not necessary, and two, it's like, are you really going against the grain, or are you being who you are? That's something we have to really ask ourselves. Like, is it that I'm going against the grain, I'm shaking things up, like I'm causing an issue, or are you being who you are and it's really not an issue? They just don't like it, and that's okay. Because one of the things that we have to be okay with is not being liked by everyone. Is not the end of the world. It's okay if people aren't giving their approval of you. Like, that's okay. Don't feel like you have to then conform or change to be who they want you to be. I just want you to be able to extend grace to this version of you who is learning and who's figuring this out, because I know it's not easy, especially when it's something that has been ingrained in you from your childhood, especially. It's not easy to unlearn a lot of things overnight. Like, it's a process. You have these things that have been ingrained in you for 20, 30, 40, 50, 60 years. And now as you're coming into these realizations, you're having to figure it out. And that's not easy. And I think sometimes we can forget that as we are changing patterns, as we are changing the narrative of the people who have come before us, it can feel scary because it's like you don't know what you're doing and you really don't have any guidance. And sometimes, even with good intentions, the people who we go to for guidance, they don't know what they're doing either, and they're trying to guide you. And it really do become the blind leading the blind. But listen, understand that there are going to be some situations and some circumstances that you are walking into in this season specifically where you are the blueprint. God has positioned you specifically for where it is that you are right now and where he's trying to take you to. And he wants you to lean on him to be the resource. He wants you to lean on him to be the guide. And I know that that is a really scary and uncomfortable position to be in, because it's like you want to ask others for advice. You want that approval from other people. And you might even be in a season where you have to not be doing anything to shut down that performance-based mentality. And as a result of that, you are having to seek him. You are having to lean on him. You're having to really put yourself in a position where it's like, okay, I'm not seeking other people's approval. I'm not asking for other people's thoughts or opinions on it. Like, I'm going to be obedient to what I'm supposed to be doing in this season. And listen, I cannot stress this enough, because this is a daily conversation for myself. Please give grace to the version of you who is still becoming. Please give grace to the version of you who is figuring it out, because listen, she's new here. Like, You don't know what you're doing. You're new here. You're in a new space. You're in a new season. You're in a new level, and you're having to figure it out as you go. You're the blueprint. And so the instructions aren't mapped out for you already. You're figuring it out as you go, and that's okay. I know it's uncomfortable, but that's okay. Give yourself grace as you are learning the areas that you need to work on, learning the areas that you need to change. And don't allow pride to keep you in a place where you feel like this is how I've always been doing it. Okay. We may have always been doing things like this, but it's time for a change, because has it served you well? The things that you have always done, has it served you well? Has it gotten you to where you want to be? Has it really served you well? And be honest about that. It's okay if it hasn't. That just means we need to adapt. We need to change. We need to do something differently. Okay. All right. Last thing that I want to share on this, that's gonna be a little honest here. So one of the biggest revelations that I had as I was thinking about this particular topic, and I was like, do I want to air my dirty laundry like this? We're gonna share, because this is the potty, and this is our space for girl chat, for us to have some honest tea. So one of the things that I realized, that having this performance-based, performance-driven mentality, was that I put a lot of value and worth into what I did, or what made me feel like I would be a quote unquote like good catch as far as being in a relationship. And it wasn't even on some like prideful thing, but it's like, it was that feeling of like, I'm good to bring home to mama. It was the thing of like, we cute in the face, thick in the waist. And this feeling of like, I have a podcast, I've written books, like this list of resume, which I'm not going to go down because I just feel like that's just doing the most. But it's like I had this list of things in my mind that, although I had never said it out loud, it's like, I do this, I've done this, I'm successful in these ways. There are these things that I feel like on paper, it's like I'm a good catch. And as a result of that, I realized that I did not do the inner work to be prepared for a relationship, because I had put everything, as far as I hate when people like, what do you bring to the table? It's like, don't do that. Don't be that person. But for the sake of this, it's like I felt like what I brought to the table was a list of all these things that I do, things that I've done, things that I felt like made me a quote unquote good catch. And I realized once I was in a relationship that what I deemed to make me good, quote unquote, was solely based off, I wouldn't say solely, but was based off what I did and not who I was. And what I realized within the relationship is that, yes, I have the podcast, I have ministry, I have all these different things that I've done, but I also have bad communication. I also avoid conflict. I also have an attitude. I also have a lot of things that were flawed coming into a relationship. I was not emotionally available. I did not know what I wanted. I didn't know if I wanted to be in a relationship. And the interesting thing is, we can put ourselves in a position where we are so focused on what we do and wanting people to approve or to like us for what we do, that we forget about the who we are part at times. And we are so busy doing all of the things that we don't take the time to do the inner work. And if I'm being honest, I did not take the time to do the inner work. I'll say this, I take that back. That's not true. And if I'm being honest, it's not that I didn't do the inner work. It was more so of, there was a lot more to do that I didn't focus on, or that I didn't realize until it was exposed within a relationship. And I've always asked for someone who was patient, and I didn't realize that I needed someone who was patient to deal with that. And so now I'm in a relationship having to figure those things out and having to work through those things, which is challenging because you end up having more errors than you have trials. And in addition to wanting someone patient, I always said that I wanted someone that when they met me, they didn't know about anything that I did. in spite of me having this mindset of like, oh, this is what I bring to the table because I do this, and this, and this. I didn't want someone who knew about any of that because like I want you to get to know me for who I am without like any of that. I don't want you to kind of jump on a bandwagon because of that. And as a result of that, I'm realizing, or I've realized, I feel like I've come a long way there, but I've realized that, okay, if you don't know any of this, then all we going based off of is who you are. And woo, child, like it's a whole lot of work that has to be done here. And that's okay. Because what did I say? Give grace to the version of you who is becoming, because she's new here. She's figuring it out, and that's okay. But the beautiful thing about that is you end up with somebody who really likes you, approves of you, wants to be with you in spite of. And I'm not trying to harp on the relationship thing. However, I do feel like we have been trained and manipulated, even shall I say, to believe that you get yourself together. You become this perfect version of you. You work on yourself, and then God will send you a man. Like you do all of these things right. You over here, you go to therapy, you get healed, you get whole, you do all of these things, and God will send you the person that's for you. And it's like, first of all, do that for yourself. Don't do that for somebody else. Because also, again, that's another performance-driven, performance-based mindset of, well, I'm healed and I'm whole and I'm deserving of this because of that. That's for you, baby. Like, bring that to the table for you. Like you need that for you. But I can genuinely say that the relationship that I'm in, it's not because I was so great. It's not because I did everything right. It's not because I was in ministry. It's not because I was so right and so close with God. It happened in spite of me, if we're being honest. And I want to share that because I do feel like there are a lot of women who feel like, oh, I'm not in a relationship because I'm not doing this right, or because I got to work on this, I got to do that. Listen, we're always going to be growing. We're always going to be evolving. We're always going to be learning. And I don't ever want to give the impression that, like, oh, I had it all figured out. I was just great. I was just perfect. And God sent me something. No, it literally was in spite of me, and to this day still in spite of me. And I really, really do think that's important for us to know, because we have been trained and, like I said, manipulated to an extent to believe that there's a formula that you do X, Y, or Z, you do this, and then it will happen. And you have a lot of women who are frustrated because they feel like, I'm doing everything right. I'm exercising, I'm working out, I have this, I have that. We have all these accolades. We have all of these things to say that I'm worthy and deserving. Let me say this very clearly. You're worthy and deserving even when you're struggling, even when you might have anxiety, even when you might have depression, even when you might be failing, even when you may be in situations where you're not exactly what people would deem, quote unquote, deserving or worthy or valuable. You are, in spite of those things. It's not a matter of when you do the right things, then you're deserving. When you do the bad things, you're not deserving. You're deserving, period, even when you don't get it right. And it's important to know that, because even when we look at it from solely a spiritual side, the word tells us that even when we were yet still in our mess, when we were yet still sinners, God sent his son Jesus to die for us. Like, not when we were perfect, not when he thought that we would get everything right, we would do everything by the book, but even when he knew we were going to mess up, even when he knew we weren't going to get it right, even when he knew that we couldn't do enough to make ourselves right, he still said, you know what? I love them people enough that I'm going to send the perfect sacrifice, because there's nothing that they can do to make themselves right with me. But I'm going to send my son Jesus, that they have an opportunity to be reconciled back to me, not because of what they do, not because of how good they are, not because of how they do every single thing right, how they don't rock the boat, not because of their resume. It's because of Jesus, not because of us. And if we could adapt that mentality into our day-to-day life and realize that it's really not about us, it's not about what we do, it really is about your heart being in the right place. It really is about who you are, who God created you to be. And I really just want to encourage you in that, because I feel like so many of us are trying to keep up. So many of us are trying to have this approval. We're trying to be in a position where we're making everyone happy. And it's like, you feel like as long as I'm doing stuff, as long as I'm doing the right things, then everything's going to be good. Everything's going to work out. Everyone's going to be happy with me. And even if they're not, like, that's okay too. So I hope that this was helpful. This episode is not what I intended it for it to be like. I talked about some of the things I plan to talk about. We took a lot of detours, but I always feel like how it comes out is how it should come out. So we're not going to re-record it. We're going to put it out as is. But I do hope that this was helpful for you all. And I hope that it does give you encouragement to know that you don't have to, you're not great or amazing because of what you do. It's because of who you are, and who you are is enough. It's not like, well, I have a good heart, but I also can do this. I can do it. You're great as you are, who you are. And it's not dependent upon your performance. It's not dependent upon what you do for people. It's not dependent upon all the things. It really is about who you are. Like, that is enough. And I really do want you all to know that that is enough. So I hope that this was helpful. Make sure that you share this with a friend. And don't forget, until next time, be whole, be healed, and be authentic. Have an amazing week. Thank you so much for tuning into A Change of Heart podcast. I hope you were encouraged, and please take a moment to share with a girlfriend, and don't forget to download the episode. Lastly, I would love to connect with you. You can follow me on Instagram at Angel C. Walston and at A Change of Heart podcast. Have an amazing week, and don't forget, be whole, be healed, and be authentic.